don't want another Labour government, listen to this, it might change how you vote. Whether you voted Conservatives in the past, you're undecided of actually who you want to vote for, or you simply don't feel represented by the Labour, the Liberal Democrats or the Greens, you probably still care about the fundamental things like the economy and the cost of living and free markets, immigration and national identity and culture. You probably also care about law and order, crime rates, housing, can you actually afford to purchase a house, the NHS, all of these things. And right now, the big question for a lot of voters is this. If you don't want Labour, then where should and where does your vote actually go? Where does it make sense to go? Now, just thinking about Conservative voters for a second, typically you have the core Tory loyalists who, these are the people who think that Labour will wreck the economy, tax too much, waste money, not be tough enough on immigration. These are people that think we can't let Labour in or we can't let Labour back in. Then you have the swing Conservatives. These are people who think more, I'll vote for whoever will keep taxes low, control the borders, fix the NHS and won't blow up the economy. They're more of the swing voters. Now, the issue is this. The majority of Conservative voters no longer trust the Conservative Party to deliver its own agenda. However, with the recent statistics coming out, this may change. This could change, especially as we enter the new election, the upcoming election in a few years. But either way, so if they don't vote Conservatives, then who would these people actually vote for? Well, most Conservative voters have values and priorities more closely aligned with other parties that are more right of central, rather than it doesn't really make sense to go toward Labour, Green or the Lib Dems. Many Conservative voters now say they would or could vote Reform or actually abstain from voting at all, the latter being very worrying. Looking at recent national polls which show the voting intentions, and this changes all the time and this will likely change again, you can see that Reform would likely gain the largest share, currently sitting at about 33%, meaning they would be ahead by a big margin, polling almost double the Labour and double the Conservatives, which does suggest a serious collapse in the traditional two-party system that we see here in the UK. But here's the thing, because the United Kingdom uses a first past the post system, not a proportional representation, and you could argue about that all day, it's possible that you can win the most votes nationally, but still win very few seats if your support is spread out across the country instead of being concentrated. This could hurt Reform because Reform support is typically broad, it's national, but it's really spread out across hundreds of constituencies around the UK. So even if Reform leads the national vote, loads of people around the UK actually vote for Reform, Labour or even the Conservatives could still win the most seats. And the Prime Minister obviously comes from the party that gains the most seats, not the party with the most votes. So in this case, if this happened, Nigel Farage would not become the next PM unless Reform wins the most seats, which is probably not going to happen at current time under the first past the post system, unless their support becomes more geographically concentrated and they win the important areas, or Reform becomes a kingmaker in a hung parliament and demands Farage as PM, which is very rare and extremely unlikely. If you don't want a Labour government again, or you don't want a Labour, Green, Lib Dem coalition government, then the right-wing parties kind of need to come together. And I say this because the left-wing voters are already tactically voting. Tactically voting, when I say that, what I mean is when someone doesn't vote for their favourite party, but they instead vote for the party most likely to beat the party they dislike the most. That makes sense. Just to keep Reform out. And the data shows this very, very clearly. I think the statistics come out at current times that 57% of Lib Dem voters would actually switch to Labour in a seat where Labour is best to beat a right-wing party. Around 50% of Green voters would switch to Labour if Labour were best placed to defeat a Conservative or a Reform candidate in their constituency. Polling has also shown that 62% of people who voted Lib Dem or Green in 2019 now prioritise stopping Reform UK over actually staying loyal to their original party. So people just want Conservatives and they want Reform out. That's their number one aim. So basically, Conservatives and Reform would be out by a long way if tactical voting between these other three parties happens. And it is happening, and it probably will happen. It's really, really important that if you don't want the left in power again, you have to consider what's happening. Looking at these figures right now, we'll just use the current figures, and again, this will change. It will change over time, and it will change between now and the next general election. But let's just look here, and let's just say Greens, Labour and Lib Dems all tactically vote to keep Reform out. With these numbers, Reform UK would win millions of votes, and they would be the majority of votes, but they would also get almost no seats due to the first past the post structure again. Conservatives would likely win far more seats than Reform, just because, even at these numbers, just because of how their support is geographically concentrated. It's not so much evenly spread. It's very historic. You know, they've been around a long time. So you could say, okay, well, in this case, why not have Reform voters move to the Conservative Party? Yes, this does make sense, and this would be effective, and the numbers show support towards that. But in my opinion, the UK needs something way more hardcore. We've had Conservatives in the past many times, and I think we really need some fresh meat. We're at a stage, again, where the country's a mess, in my opinion, and we need something different. If Labour, Green and Lib Dems combine together, that's about 45% of combined centre-left vote. Assuming no tactical voting on the right happens, Reform would stay at about 33% and Tories at about 16%. This means in almost every constituency, the merged left vote overtakes Reform and the Conservatives. Tactical left voting produces a Labour landslide in this scenario. When Greens and Lib Dems decide to vote the way that keeps Reform and the Tories out, the following would happen. In 80 to 90% of seats, Labour becomes the highest vote share. Conservatives drop to second or third place, and Reform's vote is pretty much cancelled out by a tactical coalition. This is exactly how landslides happen under this first past the post system. Ask yourself, do you want more Labour? Is Labour currently doing this country justice? If the answer is no, then what is the realistic path forward for the right? Well, Conservative voters in general have three options. Option one, stay with the Conservatives. Now, this might block Labour in some seats, but realistically it delivers the same party that has led the last decade. It doesn't really pressure the system or change direction as such. It keeps the right split, especially if Reform continue to rise, which is exactly what we're seeing. Option B, option two, is abstain. This now pretty much guarantees that Labour win, using current numbers anyway. Make sure you use your vote. Option three is move to Reform. This shifts the entire right-wing vote base, forces the Conservatives to follow or rebuild. It also ends the uni-party behaviour that we've seen and creates a stronger right-wing bloc for future elections. Potential for realignment maybe. If Conservative voters tactically stand with Reform, it does this. It consolidates the entire right against the left. It breaks left-wing tactical voting, or at least it helps to do so. It forces competitive seats across England, and it stops a Labour, Green, Lib Dem kind of coalition. And it gives Reform a real shot at turning votes into seats, which is what we need. A divided right means a Labour victory. A united right means competitive election. So if you're a Conservative voter asking, well, where do I go now? Here's your answer, in my opinion. If you think the Conservatives have earned another chance, vote Tory. Simple as that. Stick to what you think. Stick to your beliefs. If you think that this country, however, needs tougher action on borders, tougher action on crime, cultural stability, energy independence, affordability, housing and national security, then I actually think Reform align with your values far more than Labour does, than Greens do, than the Lib Dems ever will. And if you want the right to win anything under the system that we have, the right cannot split. As well as this, there are some other things that need to happen that are crucially important. You know, it's not as simple as this. Number one, younger voters not overwhelmingly voting Labour and Green, which is what we're seeing right now. Number two, Reform needs concentrated support, not just big national support. Number three, Reform must field credible, high-profile local candidates. And number four, Reform needs a functioning ground campaign. Winning seats requires a lot of things. It requires canvassing, door knocking, and a whole lot more. Anyway, we're definitely seeing tactical voting on the left. So I wanted to share my opinions and my thoughts here. Do let me know yours in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and I really hope you have a wonderful day. See you next time.